A wealthy Arab businessman purchases a single mother at an auction with the intention of having a child. However, what he uncovers later leaves him stunned. Before we dive into the story, let us know in comments, which city are you tuning in from? Enjoy the tale, everyone. Maya was a young woman struggling to make ends meet while raising her son, Sammy. With no other options left, she decided to take part in an unconventional auction where women were sold to wealthy, influential men. For Maya, this wasn't a choice, it was her only hope. Sitting in a corner of the opulent hall, Maya felt the weight of the decisions that had led her there. Her heart raced, each beat filled with fear and uncertainty about what lay ahead. But she kept thinking of Sammy, who was being cared for by her elderly neighbor that night. The mounting bills, the threat of eviction, and the nights Sammy went to bed hungry had pushed her to make this unimaginable decision. The event organizer, a man in a sharp suit and a practiced smile, approached her with instructions. "Remember, Maya, stay composed. Smile and don't make direct eye contact with the guests," he said before walking away. The hall was filled with elegantly dressed men, scrutinizing each woman as if they were rare treasures on display. Maya felt a knot in her throat as her name was called. "Lot number 23, the organizer announced in a theatrical tone. Maya's legs shook as she climbed the steps to the brightly lit stage. The intense lights momentarily blinded her, and the heat from the spotlights made beads of sweat form on her forehead. She tried to hold her head high, but felt the piercing gazes fixed on her. "A true exotic beauty," the organizer continued, using words that made Maya feel even more exposed. The crowd murmured in approval. Suddenly, a deep, commanding voice cut through the room. $1 million. The hall fell silent. All eyes turned toward a man with tan skin and sharp eyes, seated in the back row. He radiated power and authority. It was Tariq al-Mansur, a wealthy Arab tycoon known for his immense fortune and private nature. The organizer, stunned by the opening bid, repeated the amount to confirm. No other offers followed. "Sold," he declared with a satisfied grin. Maya felt her legs weaken, but she kept her composure as she stepped off the stage. Her life had just changed forever. Tariq approached her, his expression serious and unreadable. "We need to discuss the terms," he said calmly, extending his hand to guide her. Maya hesitated but followed him to a private room where the fate she had sealed on the stage would be finalized. The room was spacious and elegantly decorated. Tariq gestured toward a chair for Maya to sit. He walked over to a nearby table and picked up an envelope that had been placed there earlier. "Here's the contract," he said, handing it to Maya. "Read it carefully." Maya took the document, her hands trembling. The silence in the room was overwhelming as she read the first few clauses. Her breathing grew heavier as she reached the main section. "You want me to have a child and leave it with you?" she asked, her voice shaking. Tariq crossed his arms and nodded. "I need an heir. After the child is born, you'll leave. The contract makes that clear." Maya stood up, a wave of anger and fear washing over her. "I can't do this. I won't abandon my own child." Tariq's eyes narrowed, but his voice remained steady. "You knew what you were getting into when you entered that auction. There's no room for regret now." "This is inhumane," Maya shot back, gripping the contract tightly. "Do you think you can just buy a child and discard the mother?" Tariq stepped forward, his presence dominating the room. "I paid $1 million for you, Maya. This wasn't a whim. Now you have no choice." Maya felt her heart race. She knew she was trapped in a situation she couldn't escape. Tariq placed a pen on the table in front of her. "Sign the contract. Once the baby is born, you'll receive the money and be free to go on with your life." Maya stared at the contract, her hands shaking with anger and despair. She thought of Sammy and the sacrifice she was making to secure his future. Tears threatened to fall, but she held them back. "This isn't right," she murmured, sitting down again. Tariq leaned in, his gaze intense. "What's right or wrong doesn't matter here. What matters is that you honor the agreement." Maya knew she had no choice. With a heavy heart, she picked up the pen and signed the contract. Tariq took the document and said, "Very well. Tomorrow morning, we'll do the necessary medical exams, and you'll be taken to my estate. Get some rest." He left the room, leaving Maya alone with her thoughts and regrets. She looked at her signature on the contract, feeling as though she had sealed her own fate. The next day, a limousine waited for Maya in front of her small apartment. Saying goodbye to Sammy had been brief and painful. She had told him she needed to work far away for a few months, promising to call whenever she could. The child, innocent and unaware, waved with a bright smile, oblivious to what his mother was enduring. The journey to the estate was silent. Maya stared out the window, watching the desert landscape gradually give way to modern, luxurious structures. When they arrived, the grandeur of the property left her speechless. Tall iron gates opened to reveal immaculate gardens and a mansion that seemed like something out of a fairy tale. Tariq was waiting at the entrance, his expression as serious as ever. He guided her inside, briefly explaining the rooms and the house rules. Your privacy will be respected, but I expect you to fulfill your part of the agreement without question, he said before leaving her in the care of a staff member named Nadia. Nadia, a kind middle-aged woman, showed Maya to her room. The space was elegantly decorated with soft tones, a stark contrast to the simplicity of her previous life. On the bed lay clothes and accessories selected for her. If you need anything, I'll be nearby, Nadia said with a warm smile. Maya thanked her but couldn't shake the feeling of being a stranger in this place. That night, as she gazed at the horizon from her room's balcony, her thoughts turned to Sammy. The pain of being away from him was suffocating, but she had to believe she was doing what was best to secure his future. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Tariq. Tomorrow we'll visit my trusted doctor, he informed her before leaving. Maya nodded silently. The weight of her decision grew heavier with each passing moment, but there was no turning back now. The next morning, Maya woke early, the silence of the mansion more unsettling than comforting. Her first night there had been sleepless, filled with incessant thoughts about what lay ahead. The bed was soft, the sheets silk, but the weight of reality made peace impossible to find. Soon, Nadia knocked on the door to escort her to Tariq's doctor. The journey through the mansion was marked by its evident luxury. Hallways adorned with Persian rugs, paintings by renowned artists, and vast windows showcasing the meticulously maintained gardens. Maya barely had time to take it all in before stepping into the limousine that would take them to the clinic. The doctor's office was in a modern building in the heart of Dubai. Dr. Khalid, a man with a calm demeanor and a reassuring voice, greeted Maya professionally. After thorough examinations, he declared that everything was in perfect condition to begin the fertilization process. Maya nodded silently, trying to mask her unease. Tariq remained distant throughout the procedure, observing from afar with his usual composed posture. For him, this was merely another step toward fulfilling his responsibilities, but for Maya, it was a painful reminder that at the end of those 9 months, she would face the heartbreak of leaving behind a piece of herself. Back at the estate, Maya tried to distract herself by exploring the place. Every room seemed more extravagant than the last, as if Tariq's wealth knew no bounds. There was a library with floor-to-ceiling shelves, an indoor pool surrounded by marble columns, and a music room filled with exotic instruments. Despite its splendor, the mansion felt empty, almost soulless. Maya noticed that although Tariq lived surrounded by beauty, his life seemed marked by deep loneliness. He rarely smiled, and his few acts of courtesy were cold and calculated. In the first few days, Tariq kept his interactions with Maya strictly professional. He made sure everything aligned with the contract, but made no effort to connect with her on a personal level. Maya, meanwhile, felt increasingly out of place. She spent her nights staring at the ceiling, wondering how Sammy was doing, and her mornings grappling with the reality that she would soon carry a child she couldn't keep. During the second week, Tariq hosted a formal dinner at the estate for some business associates. Maya was instructed to dress elegantly and accompany Tariq as part of their agreement. The dress she wore was exquisite, but her steps were hesitant as she descended the grand staircase. In the hall, the guests observed her with curiosity. Some greeted her politely, while others exchanged glances that made her feel exposed. Tariq, however, stayed by her side the entire time, introducing her as my special guest. "Are you okay?" he asked in a rare moment of concern as they stepped aside to a quieter corner. "I'm trying to adjust," Maya replied honestly. Tariq nodded but said nothing more. For him, social events were a formality, an extension of his obligations. For Maya, however, it was a plunge into a world she didn't fully understand. After the dinner, Maya went up to her room, exhausted. Before sleeping, she called her neighbor to check on Sammy. Her son's cheerful voice comforted her, but it also brought tears. She felt an overwhelming longing, but she knew she couldn't give in to the temptation to turn back. As the days passed, Maya began to notice small details about Tariq that contradicted his stern exterior. He was meticulous and demanding, but he also showed brief moments of humanity. One afternoon, she found him in the garden, personally tending to a rare plant that seemed special to him. "This plant belonged to my mother," he explained, noticing Maya's curiosity. "She used to say that caring for it brought peace." Maya felt a pang of empathy. For the first time, Tariq seemed less like an imposing figure and more like a man trying to cope with his own pain. She began to realize that, although their motivations differed, both of them carried heavy burdens. Nadia, the housekeeper, also began to open up more to Maya. During the long afternoons at the estate, Nadia shared stories about Tariq's life, recounting how he had taken on responsibilities at a very young age after the death of his parents. These conversations helped Maya better understand a man who, until then, had seemed impenetrable. Even so, the loneliness lingered. Maya avoided growing attached to the estate or Tariq, constantly reminding herself that her time there was limited. Yet, amidst the isolation, she found solace in her walks through the gardens and the quiet nights spent stargazing from her balcony. One evening, Tariq knocked on her door. He seemed less rigid than usual, his expression slightly softened. "We need to talk," he said, entering. Maya sat down, expecting more instructions or demands. Instead, Tariq appeared uncertain, as if searching for the right words. "I know this arrangement is difficult for you," he began. "I don't intend to make it harder. I just want you to know that, despite everything, I respect your courage." Maya was taken aback. Tariq's words were unexpectedly kind, and for the first time, she saw something in his eyes she hadn't noticed before: vulnerability. The moment was brief, but it was enough to plant a seed of doubt in her mind. Perhaps Tariq wasn't as cold as he appeared. Perhaps, behind the facade, there was someone as broken as she was. After he left, Maya found herself reflecting on their conversation. For the first time since arriving at the estate, she felt there might be a possibility, however distant, of discovering something deeper in their relationship. The days at the estate continued at a slow pace, but each moment seemed to add a new layer to the complex dynamic between Maya and Tariq. They were like puzzle pieces, trying to fit together amidst the circumstances that had brought them together. Maya knew that time was passing and that soon she would carry Tariq's child. This reality terrified her, but it also stirred a growing curiosity. Who was the man who had asked her to make such a profound sacrifice? Life at the estate began to follow a more predictable rhythm. Maya, though still struggling with the weight of her decision, started to notice small details about the house and her new routine. The garden became her refuge, a place where she could feel the warmth of the sun and listen to the soothing sound of water flowing through the fountains. She noticed that Tariq also spent a lot of time in the gardens. He didn't go out of his way to start conversations, but Maya could tell he was observing her every move. There was a subtle tension in the air, something both of them recognized, but chose not to address. One afternoon, while walking through the garden, Maya noticed Tariq meticulously pruning a tree. When he sensed her presence, he glanced up briefly before returning to his task, making it clear he wasn't expecting a conversation. "Do you enjoy gardening?" Maya ventured, breaking the silence. "It helps me organize my thoughts," Tariq replied without looking at her. Maya sensed a small opening in his response. He was reserved, but not entirely unapproachable. She decided to respect his space, but couldn't ignore her growing curiosity about the complexity behind his rigid facade. That evening during dinner, Tariq surprised Maya by joining her at the table. Until then, her meals had been solitary, served by Nadia in her room or a quiet corner of the house. He seemed calm, but his presence carried a weight Maya couldn't overlook. "Are you adjusting?" he asked, breaking the silence as he poured himself a glass of wine. "I think so, as much as I can," Maya replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Tariq studied her for a moment, as if trying to read her thoughts. "I know it's not easy, but I hope you understand that all of this is necessary." Maya wanted to ask necessary for whom, but kept the thought to herself. Instead, she nodded and continued eating in silence. There was something in the way he spoke that suggested, beneath his imposing demeanor, he carried an emotional burden he carefully concealed. As weeks passed, Maya began noticing small acts of kindness from Tariq. He was discreet, yet thoughtful. One day, after she casually mentioned missing certain foods from her homeland, Nadia brought a tray of dishes prepared especially for her. "Mr. Tariq asked me to make these," Nadia explained with a smile. Maya was surprised but said nothing. It was hard to decipher Tariq's intentions. On one hand, he was cold and distant. On the other, he seemed to care about her well-being in subtle ways. One morning, Maya found a collection of books neatly arranged on her bedside table. Among them were novels and stories she had mentioned during a casual conversation. She couldn't help but feel a warmth in her chest, realizing Tariq paid attention to the little things. A defining moment occurred when Maya approached the estate's music room. The door was slightly ajar, and soft piano notes echoed down the hallway. Curious, she stepped inside and saw Tariq playing with a skill she never would have expected. "You play piano?" she asked, surprised. Tariq looked up, clearly startled to have been caught in such an intimate moment. "My mother taught me when I was a child," he said, pulling his hands away from the keyboard. "It's beautiful," Maya remarked, stepping closer. He averted his gaze as if unsure how to respond to a compliment. In that brief moment, Maya saw that beneath all his rigidity was someone with a deep emotional connection to his past. On another occasion, Maya was in the garden when a small bird fell from a branch, clearly injured. Without hesitation, she knelt and gently picked up the fragile creature. Tariq appeared shortly after, watching her with curiosity. "What will you do with it?" he asked. "I'll take care of it until it's strong enough to fly again," Maya replied with conviction. Tariq remained silent, but there was something in his eyes that suggested admiration. That simple act of compassion seemed to touch him in an unexpected way. The nights in the estate were lonely, but Maya found comfort in the small routine she developed. She enjoyed wandering the silent corridors, marveling at the grandeur of the architecture. One evening, she crossed paths with Tariq in the hallway. He looked tired, his features softer than usual. "Can't sleep?" he asked. Maya hesitated before replying. "Sometimes it's hard with so much on my mind." Tariq nodded, as though he understood completely. To her surprise, Tariq invited her to have tea in the library. Seated among shelves filled with books, they talked for longer than they ever had before. In that moment, Maya realized she was beginning to see beyond Tariq's mask. The household staff noticed the changes too. Nadia, who had always been kind, now seemed closer to Maya, treating her like a friend. Even Tariq appeared more at ease in her presence. Though he still maintained his formality, there was something different in the way he looked at her, as if he was beginning to see her in a new light. Maya, in turn, began to feel less isolated. Despite the nature of their contract, she found herself discovering small moments of connection and meaning in the seemingly empty estate. Yet, the reality of her situation still loomed over her like a shadow. Each day, she reminded herself that all of this was temporary. As the first signs of change in their dynamic emerged, Maya knew she needed to prepare for the challenges ahead. Tariq was a complex man, and she was only just beginning to understand the layers of his personality. Deep down, she knew their journeys were only starting to intertwine on a deeper level. The days continued to pass, and Maya found herself increasingly immersed in the estate's routine. Despite her efforts to maintain emotional distance, small moments with Tariq began to leave an impression on her. He, in turn, displayed a growing, albeit restrained, interest in getting to know her better. "I see in them the future," something that needs to be nurtured with love and responsibility, he replied during one of their conversations. That experience deeply moved Maya, who began to realize that Tariq had layers she had yet to uncover. Over time, small gestures brought them closer. Tariq began asking more about Maya's likes and interests, and she, in turn, found ways to show appreciation for his attentiveness. Their conversations in the garden became a routine, as did their evenings in a library where they shared books and discussed their stories. During one of those nights, Tariq asked a question that caught her off guard. If you could change anything about your past, what would it be? Maya remained silent for a few moments, thinking, I think I'd have chosen more wisely whom to trust, but at the same time, I'm not sure I'd change everything. Without the wrong choices, I wouldn't have Sammy. Her son's name hung in the air like a shadow. Tariq sensed the weight of her words and shifted the conversation, giving her space. Despite their growing connection, Maya still felt uncertain. She knew the contract between them was a barrier that couldn't be ignored. No matter how much she began to like Tariq, the thought of their time being limited to 9 months lingered in her mind. One night, as Maya gazed at the stars from her balcony, Tariq joined her. They sat in silence for a while, simply contemplating the sky. You think a lot about the future, don't you? He asked, breaking the silence. I can't help it, Maya admitted. All of this feels so temporary. Tariq turned to her, and for a brief moment his eyes met hers with an intensity that made her hold her breath. The future can be built, Maya. It all depends on how we choose to handle the present. Maya felt a warmth she couldn't explain from those words. Although he hadn't spoken directly, there was an implicit promise in his tone, something that made her believe their destiny might still be unwritten. The staff at the estate began to notice the change in atmosphere. The coldness that once filled the place had been replaced by a lighter, almost welcoming vibe. Nadia, in particular, was pleased to see how Tariq seemed less isolated and more open. Maya also noticed changes within herself. For the first time in months, she felt she was reconnecting with a part of herself she thought she'd lost. Even so, Maya knew she was approaching a crossroads. She was fully aware that the feelings developing between her and Tariq could complicate things even further. But for now, she chose to embrace the present, even though the future remained uncertain. Dawn brought a soft light to the estate, but Maya felt restless. The bond forming between her and Tariq was something she hadn't anticipated, and the weight of the secret about Sammy grew heavier each day. The possibility of Tariq discovering the truth terrified her. Yet, keeping it hidden was becoming increasingly unbearable. After breakfast, Maya decided to walk through the gardens to clear her mind. She tried to lose herself among the flowers and trees, but her peace was interrupted when she heard Nadia call her urgently. Maya hurried back to the estate and found Tariq in the living room, holding a photograph. His expression was difficult to read. "Who is this boy?" he asked, his voice controlled but laden with tension. Maya froze. The photo in his hands was of Sammy, one of the few she had brought with her. She had hidden it carefully, but somehow Tariq had found it. "He's my son," Maya admitted, her voice trembling. The silence that followed was suffocating. Tariq walked slowly toward her, his dark eyes locked on hers. "You lied to me," he said, his voice low but sharp. "Why didn't you tell me from the start?" Maya felt tears welling up, but forced herself to keep her head high. "I was afraid it would complicate everything. I thought you wouldn't think I was suitable for the contract." Tariq crossed his arms, still scrutinizing her. "And why did you agree to this, knowing you'd have to leave another child behind?" The question hit Maya like a blow. She took a deep breath before answering. "I did it for him. For the bills, the overdue rent, the nights he went to bed hungry. I had no other choice." Her words were filled with emotion, and Tariq remained silent for a long moment, as though processing everything he had just heard. Finally, he turned and walked to the window. "You should have trusted me," he said, gazing at the horizon. Maya felt the weight of disappointment in his words and couldn't hold back her tears. She knew this moment could shatter the connection they were building, but she also knew she could no longer hide the truth. Later that night, Tariq asked Maya to join him in the library. The room was dimly lit by the soft glow of a lamp, creating an intimate yet tense atmosphere. Tariq sat in his usual chair, a folder of documents in front of him. "I've reviewed the terms of our contract," he began bluntly. "There's nothing in it that mentions the possibility of you keeping secrets like this. However, it also doesn't address how to handle the situation we're in now." Maya felt a wave of panic. "Please don't send me away. I'll fulfill my part of the agreement, I promise." Tariq raised a hand to stop her. "I'm not suggesting that, but trust is essential, Maya, and now we need to rebuild it." He opened the folder and pulled out a sheet, sliding it toward her so she could read. "I want you to see Sammy. You're allowed to visit him, but on one condition: he cannot know the truth about our arrangement. Not yet." Maya blinked, stunned. Tariq's generosity caught her off guard, but it also brought a fresh wave of guilt. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Tariq sighed, folding his hands on the table. "Because I know what it's like to grow up without answers. I want your son to have at least part of your presence, even if it's only temporary." Those words carried a pain Maya hadn't expected. For the first time, she felt she was beginning to understand the reasons behind Tariq's rigid demeanor. He wasn't just a man seeking an heir. He was also someone carrying deep scars. The next day, Maya was taken to visit Sammy. The journey was long, but each mile brought her closer to her son. When she arrived, emotions overwhelmed her. Sammy ran into her arms the moment he saw her, and Maya held him tightly, as if she never wanted to let him go. "Mommy, you're back!" he exclaimed, his voice filled with joy. Maya smiled, but her heart felt heavy. She knew this visit was only temporary and that soon she would have to leave him again. They spent the day together, playing and laughing as they had in the old days. But as night fell, Maya felt the weight of their impending goodbye. When the moment came, Sammy hugged her tightly, asking when she would return. "Soon, my love," she promised, even though she knew how uncertain that word was. Back at the estate, Maya was both physically and emotionally drained. Tariq was waiting for her in the living room, his expression calm. "How is he asked, his voice laced with genuine concern. Maya sank into the sofa across from him, feeling completely vulnerable. "He's well, happy, but it's hard to leave him." Tariq nodded as if he understood perfectly. He said nothing more, but his gaze conveyed something words couldn't express. In the days that followed, the dynamic between them shifted. There was a quiet understanding, a mutual respect that hadn't existed before. Tariq became more considerate, and Maya, in turn, began to trust him more. Small gestures like sharing a meal or chatting during a walk in the gardens became meaningful moments. One evening, as they sat in the library, Tariq revealed something Maya hadn't expected. "My mother died when I was young," he said, his voice low. "My father was always distant, focused on business. I grew up with responsibilities before I even understood what they meant." Maya watched him closely, realizing he was sharing something deeply personal. "That must have been difficult," she said sincerely. "It was, but I think it shaped who I am today. And no matter how hard I try, I can't shake the feeling that something will always be missing." Maya felt an urge to comfort him, but knew Tariq still kept some barriers up. Even so, that moment of vulnerability brought them closer together. As the months passed, their relationship continued to evolve. What had initially been a cold agreement was now marked by mutual respect and admiration. Maya began to see Tariq not just as a powerful man, but as someone capable of great humanity. Tariq, in turn, saw in Maya a strength and compassion he hadn't expected. Still, they both knew that time was passing, and that they would soon have to face the uncertain future awaiting them. The days after Maya's visit to Sammy brought a strange calm to the estate. There was something different in the way Tariq and Maya interacted. What had once been a tense relationship now felt marked by a quiet acceptance. Yet, the weight of the contract still loomed over them like a constant shadow. Maya found solace in small routines. Her morning walks in the garden, afternoons reading in the library, and nights spent stargazing from the balcony. Despite this, the thought of her son never left her, and the sound of his voice continued to echo in her mind. One morning, while having her coffee, Maya was surprised by Tariq's arrival. He seemed more relaxed than usual, and there was something almost friendly in his expression. "I want you to come with me today," he said, breaking the silence. Maya looked at him intrigued. "Where to?" she asked. "I have a meeting at one of my family's properties. It's a quiet place, and I think you'll like it." She hesitated for a moment, but eventually agreed. Any opportunity to leave the estate was welcome. The car ride was quiet, but not uncomfortable. Tariq drove calmly, while Maya watched the scenery change as they left the city center. After nearly an hour, they arrived at a secluded property surrounded by sand dunes. The place was peaceful, with a small house built in traditional Arabic style. "This place was my mother's retreat," Tariq explained as they stepped out of the car. "She used to come here whenever she needed peace." Maya followed Tariq to the house, admiring its simplicity and charm. Unlike the estate, everything here felt more inviting. The walls were adorned with rugs and antique lanterns, and the air was filled with the scent of aromatic herbs. Tariq led her to a terrace overlooking the desert. The silence was absolute, broken only by the soft sound of the wind. Maya sat in one of the wooden chairs, feeling more at ease than she had in weeks. "This is the only place where I can think clearly," Tariq confessed as he sat beside her. "It's beautiful," Maya replied, gazing at the horizon. Tariq remained silent for a few moments before asking, "Do you miss your home?" Maya sighed, reflecting on her life before all of this. "I miss what it represented. A simple place, but full of memories." Tariq nodded, seeming to understand. There was something comforting about that moment. A connection that didn't need words. After the visit to the property, the relationship between Tariq and Maya became even more natural. He started involving her in more aspects of his life, like meetings with the estate staff and decisions about the daily routine. For Maya, it was an opportunity to better understand the man behind the facade of a ruthless businessman. One evening, during dinner, Tariq brought up an unexpected topic. "I've been thinking about making some renovations to the estate," he said casually, "something to make it feel more welcoming." Maya raised her eyebrows, surprised. "And what do you have in mind?" "I want to create a space where a family could feel at home," Tariq replied, averting his gaze. Maya felt her heart tighten. It was the first time he had mentioned the possibility of a future that included more than just their contract. However, she knew there was still much to resolve before such a vision could become reality. One afternoon, as Maya walked through the gardens, she found Nadia carrying a tray with tea and cookies. The housekeeper seemed radiant, and Maya couldn't help but comment, "You seem especially cheerful today, Nadia. Did something happen?" Nadia smiled, her eyes sparkling. "It's just nice to see how things are changing around here. The estate has never felt so full of life." Maya felt her face flush, but didn't respond. She knew Nadia was referring to the shifting dynamic between her and Tariq. As uncertain as she still felt about the future, it was undeniable that something was blossoming. As the days passed, Maya began to notice that Tariq was changing too. He spent more time with her, showing himself to be more vulnerable and approachable. Conversations that were once brief and formal now stretched for hours, with both of them sharing more about their lives. In one of those conversations, Tariq revealed something that deeply touched Maya. "I never knew how to cope with losing my mother," he confessed, his voice heavy with emotion. "She was the anchor of our family. When she was gone, everything fell apart." Maya felt a wave of empathy. She knew what it was like to lose someone important, even if in different ways. That moment created an even stronger bond between them. Despite their growing closeness, Maya knew the contract was still a barrier. As much as she was growing attached to Tariq, the reality of their situation couldn't be ignored. She spent sleepless nights wondering about the future, trying to balance her feelings with her responsibilities. One night, Tariq knocked on her door, asking to talk. He seemed unsettled, as if grappling with something important. "I know we have our limitations," he began, sitting in the chair across from Maya's bed. "But I want you to know that I'm trying to understand what all of this means." Maya felt her heart race. There was something in his words that hinted at a significant shift. "I'm trying to," she replied honestly. Tariq nodded, seeming relieved to hear that. Despite the lingering uncertainties, both were willing to face whatever came next together. The estate staff began to notice the impact of these changes. Nadia, ever observant, remarked how Tariq seemed lighter, more human. Even the other employees commented on how Maya's presence had transformed the once cold and impersonal atmosphere. Maya, for her part, felt more at home. Despite the weight of the contract, she started seeing the estate as more than just a temporary stop. It was a place where she was building something, even if she wasn't yet sure what it would become. At the end of each day, as she gazed at the stars, Maya knew she was approaching a turning point. The bond forming between her and Tariq was something she hadn't planned for, but now felt inevitable. Both were changing, and the journey they had started together was beginning to take a shape neither could have predicted. The days at the estate continued to pass, but something undeniable lingered in the air. Maya and Tariq's connection was deepening. Small gestures, lingering glances, and extended conversations hinted that the boundaries of the contract were being challenged. Yet Maya knew that every moment they shared was leading her closer to a critical juncture. One morning, as Tariq reviewed documents in his office, Maya walked in with a tray of coffee. He looked up, clearly surprised, but said nothing as she set the tray on the desk. "I thought you could use a break," she said, trying to sound casual. Tariq studied her for a moment before replying. "Thank you. Lately, it's been hard to stay focused." Maya hesitated before sitting in the chair opposite him. "Something with the business?" He shook his head. "No, just a lot to process." The silence that followed was heavy but not uncomfortable. Both seemed to weigh the unspoken words hanging between them. Maya finally broke the silence. "Do you feel you've made the right decisions so far?" Tariq looked at her, his expression softening. "I'm not sure. Life taught me to be pragmatic, but sometimes I wonder if being so rigid has distanced me from what truly matters." Maya sensed the vulnerability in his words. For the first time, he seemed to be admitting that more was at stake than just his family and business obligations. In the days that followed, their routine began to shift. Tariq started inviting Maya to accompany him to meetings and social events. He seemed genuinely interested in including her in his world, and Maya began to understand better the pressures and responsibilities he carried. During a charity dinner, Tariq introduced Maya as his companion. The guests exchanged curious glances, but Tariq appeared indifferent. To him, the opinions of others were irrelevant. Maya, however, felt uneasy under the weight of the attention she was receiving. "Are you okay?" Tariq asked, leading her to a quieter corner. "I'm getting used to it," Maya replied, forcing a smile. Tariq briefly held her hand, a gesture that surprised her, but also comforted her. "Don't worry, I'm here with you." Those simple yet meaningful words filled Maya with an inexplicable warmth. Their moments of intimacy became more frequent. Maya noticed that Tariq was opening up more, sharing details about his life that had previously been hidden. He spoke about his childhood, his family's expectations, and the pressure of maintaining the Al Mansur legacy. In return, Maya shared stories of her own life, about the struggles of raising Sammy and the small moments of joy she found amidst the challenges. Tariq listened attentively, revealing a more human and receptive side. One night, as they walked through the moonlit gardens, Tariq stopped abruptly. "Maya, I want you to know that, despite everything, you've shown me things I'd never noticed before." Maya looked at him, surprised. "Like what?" "That there's more to life than obligations and contracts. That sometimes you need to make room for something new." Maya felt her heart race. She knew she was falling for Tariq, but she also knew the contract remained an unyielding barrier. The estate staff began to notice the change in their dynamic. Nadia, ever observant, started treating Maya with more warmth, almost as if she already saw her as a permanent part of the household. Other staff members exchanged knowing smiles whenever they saw Tariq and Maya together. Despite this, Maya couldn't ignore the weight of reality. With each passing day, the end of the contract loomed closer. The fear of losing everything, including the bond she had built with Tariq, gnawed at her. One afternoon, as Maya was reading in the library, Tariq entered with a somber expression. "We need to talk," he said, closing the door behind him. Maya set the book aside, sensing the tension in the air. "What's going on?" Tariq sat across from her, clasping his hands on the table. We need to discuss the future. I know the contract outlines what should happen after the baby is born, but things have changed. Maya held her breath. She had known this moment would come, but she wasn't prepared. What do you mean by that? She asked hesitantly. I want to consider other options, Tariq said firmly. I don't want you to just leave. Maya's heart raced, but she didn't know how to respond. What he was suggesting was exactly what she hoped for, yet the fear of raising her expectations held her back. And what does that mean? She finally asked. It means we need to find a way to make this work, together. Those words echoed in Maya's mind. She knew the situation was complicated, but for the first time in a long while she felt a spark of hope. In the days that followed, Maya and Tariq began speaking more openly about their fears and expectations. Both knew they were dealing with feelings far beyond what they had planned. Maya began envisioning a future with Tariq and her son, while Tariq started seeing the possibility of building a real family. Even so, they still faced challenges. Tariq remained haunted by his family's expectations, while Maya struggled to accept that her life would never be the same. But together, they found strength in each other. On a quiet evening, as they watched the stars from the terrace, Tariq turned to Maya and said something she would never forget. I didn't know what love was until you came into my life. Tears streamed down Maya's face, but this time they were tears of joy. She knew that despite the difficulties, something special had blossomed between them. The estate, once cold and isolated, now held the potential to be a home, and the bond between them was stronger than any contract. As the sun began to set over the estate, casting a golden glow through the windows, Maya sat in the music room at the piano, one of her newfound sanctuaries. She gently ran her fingers over the keys, creating a melancholic melody when Tariq entered quietly. Did you teach yourself to play? He asked, interrupting the gentle flow of music. Maya looked up, surprised, but offered a faint smile. My mother taught me when I was little. It was something that connected us, even in difficult times. Tariq nodded, stepping closer. He sat beside her on the piano bench, watching her fingers glide delicately over the keys. You have talent, he said softly. Maya felt the weight of the tension between them, but didn't respond. Tariq remained silent for a few moments before continuing. Maya, I've been thinking a lot about what we've shared, about what brought us to this point. She stopped playing and turned to face him. The seriousness in his eyes made her realize he was about to address something important. And what have you concluded? She asked, trying to remain calm. Tariq took a deep breath before speaking. I can't keep ignoring the feelings that have grown between us. But I also know that my past and my family's expectations have always been obstacles. Maya felt a mix of hope and apprehension. Tariq rarely spoke about his internal struggles, and hearing this was a sign that he was ready to confront his own demons. That same evening, Tariq invited her for a walk in the gardens. The gentle breeze and rustling leaves created a serene atmosphere, but the weight of the impending conversation hung in the air. My father was a strict man, Tariq began as they walked side by side. He believed the family's honor was above all else. I grew up trying to meet his expectations, and it shaped the way I see the world. Maya listened attentively, feeling the pain in Tariq's words. When my mother died, he became even more distant. Tariq continued. Everything became about maintaining control, ensuring nothing strayed from the plan. And that's why you feel you need an heir? Maya asked softly. Tariq stopped and turned to her. Partly, but also because deep down, I think I've always been afraid of being alone. Maya felt a pang in her chest. She knew what it was like to battle loneliness. But hearing this from Tariq made her realize that behind his impenetrable exterior was someone deeply human. The next day, Tariq asked Maya to join him on a trip to the desert. They left early, and soon the vast golden sands stretched out before them like an endless ocean. When they arrived at a secluded oasis, Tariq explained that this was a special place for him, a retreat he visited when he needed clarity. This place reminds me that even in the middle of the desert there's life, he said as they walked along the edge of the crystal-clear water. Maya felt connected to the moment, sensing it was a turning point in their journey. They sat under the shade of a palm tree, and Tariq began speaking again. I've spent so much time trapped by the past and the expectations of others that I've never allowed myself the chance to figure out what I truly want. Maya looked at him, feeling the sincerity in his words. And what do you want now? She asked, her heart pounding. Tariq turned to her, his eyes shining under the sunlight. I want to live differently. I want to build something real, something not defined by contracts or obligations, Tariq said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Maya felt the tears threatening to fall, but managed to hold them back. Those words were everything she had hoped to hear. Yet uncertainties still lingered between them. When they returned to the estate, the atmosphere between them felt lighter, but both knew there were still unresolved issues. Maya spent her nights reflecting on her choices and the impact all of this would have on her son. She knew that to move forward, she would need to confront her own pain and set her fears aside. One night, while gazing at the starry sky from the balcony, Tariq joined her, carrying 2 cups of tea. He handed one to Maya and stood beside her in silence for a few moments. You know, Maya, he began in a low voice, I never thought I'd meet someone who would make me question everything I believed. She looked at him, feeling the weight of his words. You've shown me that it's possible to have more, that there's room for something beyond responsibilities and expectations. Maya gave a faint smile, her eyes filled with emotion. You've also shown me that it's possible to find strength in the midst of pain, she replied. I wouldn't have come this far without you. In the days that followed, Tariq began taking concrete steps to change the dynamic between them. He reviewed the contract, and while the clauses regarding the child's future remained, he made it clear that he wanted to find a solution that would be fair to both of them. Maya felt a mix of relief and apprehension. She knew there were still challenges ahead, but she also sensed they were finally moving in the right direction. The estate staff noticed the changes. Tariq's usual coldness had given way to a warmer demeanor, and Maya seemed more confident and at ease. One afternoon, Nadia, ever observant, remarked to Maya, I always knew Mr. Tariq had a good heart. He just needed someone to help him find it. Maya smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude for everything that had happened so far. Despite the positive changes, Maya knew the future was still uncertain. She and Tariq would have to continue facing their fears and working together to build something lasting. But for the first time, she felt hope, a chance that love could overcome the challenges. As the sun set once again over the estate, Maya and Tariq sat together on the terrace, watching the horizon. Both knew the road ahead would be difficult, but they were determined to face it side by side. The atmosphere in the estate had visibly changed. The initial tension had been replaced with a lighter mood, but the weight of the future still hung over Maya and Tariq. They both knew they were at a crossroads, and difficult decisions would need to be made. One morning, Tariq called Maya to his office for a conversation. The room, usually imposing, felt more intimate on that occasion. He gestured for her to sit, and Maya felt a mix of curiosity and apprehension. I've been thinking a lot about our agreement and everything that's happened since you arrived here, he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Maya kept her gaze fixed on him, waiting. When we made this contract, my focus was on one goal, ensuring an heir for the family. But things have changed, Tariq continued, clasping his hands on the desk. I can no longer ignore the feelings that have developed between us. Maya's heart raced. This was something she had longed to hear, but she also feared what might come next. And what does that mean? She asked softly. It means I want to find a way to make this work for both of us. I want you to stay, not as part of a contract, but because we choose to be together. Tariq's words felt like a glimmer of hope, but Maya knew it wouldn't be that simple. There were many layers to their situation, and she needed to be sure they were both ready to face the consequences. That afternoon, as she walked through the gardens, Maya reflected on what Tariq had said. As much as she felt strongly for him, the reality remained harsh. Her son, Sammy, was in another city, and the contract stipulated that she would leave after the baby was born. Later, Maya found Nadia tending to some plants near the central fountain and decided to open up. Nadia, do you think I can trust Tariq? Maya asked, her voice tinged with uncertainty. Nadia looked up, surprised by the question, but responded sincerely. Mr. Tariq is a man of his word. He never makes promises he doesn't intend to keep. But he's also human, Maya, and like you, he's trying to find a balance between what he feels and what he needs to do. Maya absorbed those words, feeling slightly more at ease, though still conflicted. The next day, Tariq invited Maya to visit an orphanage he supported, something he had done before, but this time it carried a different significance. Upon their arrival, the children greeted them with laughter and hugs. Maya felt a wave of warmth as she watched Tariq interact with them, his usual seriousness giving way to a gentler, more caring side. "You truly care about them," Maya said as they watched the children play. "They remind me that life is about more than responsibilities and business. There's beauty in simplicity," Tariq replied, looking at her with intensity. Those words resonated deeply with Maya. For the first time, she felt that Tariq was truly ready to change, to relinquish some of the control he valued so much in exchange for something more genuine. Back at the estate, Tariq made the decision to revise the contract. He gathered his lawyers and adjusted several clauses, ensuring that Maya would have more freedom and the right to maintain contact with Sammy after the baby's birth. When he presented the changes to Maya, she was visibly moved. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, holding the contract with trembling hands. "Because I want you to know you're not alone in this. I don't want you to feel trapped. I want you to stay because you trust me, not because you're obligated." Tears streamed down Maya's face. But this time, they were tears of relief and gratitude. The days continued to pass, and the bond between Tariq and Maya grew stronger. Conversations that were once formal now flowed naturally. They shared stories, dreams, and fears, building a solid foundation for whatever lay ahead. One night, as they sat on the terrace, Tariq brought up an idea he'd been considering for some time. "Maya, I want to meet Sammy." The suggestion caught Maya off guard. She remained silent for a few moments, processing what he had said. "Are you sure?" she asked hesitantly. "Absolutely. He's part of you, and I want to know every part of your life." Maya felt her heart warm. Tariq's willingness to include Sammy in their lives was a clear sign of his commitment to building something real. The trip to visit Sammy was filled with a mix of anxiety and anticipation. Tariq appeared calm, but Maya knew he was nervous. When they arrived, Sammy ran into Maya's arms, hugging her tightly. "Mommy!" he exclaimed joyfully. Tariq watched the scene with a soft smile. When Maya introduced Sammy to him, the boy looked at Tariq curiously. "Are you my mom's friend?" Sammy asked innocently. Tariq knelt to meet the boy's eye level and replied, "Yes, I am, and I hope we can be friends too." Sammy smiled, and Maya felt a mix of relief and happiness. The interaction between the two was natural, as if Sammy could sense that Tariq was a safe presence. Back at the estate, Maya began to feel that, for the first time, she was truly building something solid. Her relationship with Tariq was no longer based solely on the contract, but on trust and genuine feelings. Yet, she knew the road ahead would still require courage and patience. One evening, as they gazed at the stars together, Tariq held Maya's hand and said, "I know we still have a lot to face, but I want you to know I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this work." Maya felt her heart fill with hope. For the first time, she truly believed that a future together was possible. Life at the Al Mansur estate was becoming increasingly familiar to Maya, but the bond between her and Tariq was still developing. After the visit with Sammy, something shifted. Tariq seemed more attentive, more present, as if he was finally beginning to grasp the depth of the life Maya had led before stepping into his world. One morning, as they had coffee on the terrace, Tariq made an unexpected suggestion. "I want Sammy to live here," he said, his voice calm yet resolute. Maya's eyes widened in surprise. "Are you serious?" she asked, still processing the idea. "Yes, if we're going to build something together. I wanted to be part of it from the beginning." Maya's heart raced. The thought of having her son close was everything she had hoped for, but doubt lingered. "And what about the contract?" she questioned hesitantly. Tariq took a deep breath before responding. "The contract doesn't have to be a barrier. We can adjust the terms to ensure Sammy has a place here without compromising anything." Maya remained silent, deeply moved by Tariq's willingness to adapt his life for her. It was a gesture that spoke louder than any words could. Preparations for Sammy's arrival began immediately. Tariq instructed Nadia to prepare a room for him, decorated with elements Maya suggested. She wanted the space to feel warm and familiar, with touches that reminded Sammy of the home where he'd grown up. On the day of Sammy's arrival, Maya was anxious. When the estate doors opened and Sammy ran into her arms, she held him tightly, as if to shield him from everything. "This place is huge, Mom," Sammy exclaimed, his eyes wide with curiosity as he looked around. Tariq, who had been observing from a distance, approached slowly. He knelt to Sammy's level and extended his hand. "Welcome, Sammy. I hope you like it here." The boy shook his hand with a shy smile. "Thank you, sir." Tariq smiled, and Maya noticed that even in his seriousness, there was a genuine effort to connect with Sammy. The first few days were a mix of adjustments and discoveries. Sammy quickly adapted to the luxurious environment of the estate, exploring every corner and asking curious questions about everything. Tariq, though reserved, showed patience and interest, answering each of his questions calmly. One night, as Maya tucked Sammy into bed, he asked, "Mom, is Mr. Tariq a good man?" Maya was surprised by the question but answered honestly, "He is. He's learning to be better every day." Sammy smiled, satisfied with the answer, and soon fell asleep. Maya sat by his side, watching his peaceful face. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she was on the right path. Over time, Tariq and Sammy began to form a bond. They spent afternoons playing chess or walking in the gardens. Tariq, who once seemed so distant, revealed a more relaxed and caring side. During one of their walks, Sammy suddenly stopped and looked up at Tariq. "Do you like my mom?" he asked with the innocent curiosity of a child. Tariq chuckled, surprised by Sammy's frankness. "I do," he replied sincerely. "She's a very special woman." Sammy smiled and continued walking, leaving Tariq with a faint smile on his face. That simple yet meaningful exchange was a sign that their bond was growing stronger. One afternoon, Maya found Tariq in his office, reviewing documents. She entered slowly, hesitating. "Can I interrupt?" she asked, holding a cup of tea. Tariq looked up and smiled. "Always." She sat on the nearby sofa, watching as he returned his attention to the papers. There was something reassuring about seeing him so focused and dedicated. "You're working so hard for us," she said, breaking the silence. Tariq set down his pen and looked at her directly. "Because you're worth it." The simplicity of his response made Maya's heart race. She knew that despite all the challenges, she was building something real with him. The months flew by, and the Al Mansour estate was filled with a different energy. The relationship between Tariq and Maya deepened, and Sammy became an essential part of their home. Their bond flourished amidst new experiences, and the anticipation of the baby's arrival brought them even closer. One evening, as Maya rested on the terrace, she felt a slight discomfort in her abdomen. Thinking it was just another pregnancy symptom, she tried to ignore it, but the pain grew more intense. Alarmed, she called for Nadia, who immediately rushed to Tariq. "Maya is going into labor," Nadia announced, her eyes wide with urgency. Tariq ran to the bedroom, finding Maya breathless, trying to manage the contractions. "We're going to the hospital now," he said firmly, holding her hand. The drive to the hospital was tense. Tariq, usually composed, couldn't hide his worry. He gripped Maya's hand tightly, whispering words of encouragement as he watched her with anxious eyes. "Everything will be fine, Maya. I'm here with you," he repeated reassuringly. Upon their arrival, the medical team took over, but Tariq refused to leave Maya's side. He stayed with her throughout the labor, holding her hand and encouraging her every step of the way. Hours later, the sound of a baby's cry filled the room. Tariq looked at the tiny boy in his arms, his heart overflowing with emotion. "He's beautiful, Maya." "Perfect," he said, tears welling in his eyes. Maya smiled, exhausted but overjoyed. It was a moment that marked the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. A few days after the birth, Maya was resting in the bedroom with the baby in her arms when Tariq entered, holding an envelope. He sat beside her, his expression serious, but his eyes shining with tenderness. "Maya, I want you to know something," Tariq began as he opened the envelope. "This contract no longer holds any value." Before her surprised eyes, Tariq tore the document into small pieces, letting them fall to the floor. "Everything I've done so far has been for you and for our family. I don't want anything, not even a contract, to define our future." Tariq took Maya's hands, and with a gaze full of love, he knelt before her. "Maya, you've brought light into my life. You've taught me what true love is and what it means to have a family. I want to spend the rest of my life by your side, raising our children and facing whatever comes together." He opened a small velvet box, revealing a delicate ring with a diamond that softly reflected the light. "Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Maya's face. Her heart raced with joy, and she could barely speak. "Yes, Tariq, I will." Sammy, who had been peeking through the door, ran toward them and hugged them tightly. "We're going to be a real family," he exclaimed, beaming. Tariq lifted the boy into his arms, and together they celebrated the moment that marked the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. The months leading up to the wedding were filled with joy and preparations. Maya wanted a ceremony that reflected her roots and the love they had built, and Tariq made sure to fulfill her every wish. The estate transformed into a fairy tale setting, adorned with exotic flowers, delicate lights, and details blending both Arabic and Western traditions. Finally, the big day arrived. The sun shone brightly, illuminating the garden where the ceremony would take place. Maya looked stunning in a white dress with golden accents, while Sammy, dressed in a small formal suit, proudly carried the rings. As Maya walked down the aisle, Tariq's eyes filled with emotion. He watched her with admiration, as if seeing her for the first time. "You look breathtaking," he whispered, taking her hands. The vows were simple, yet deeply meaningful. They promised love, respect, and partnership, sealing their commitment with a kiss that drew heartfelt applause from the guests. The reception was a celebration of cultures and love. Traditional Arabic music blended with melodies from Maya's homeland, creating a festive and warm atmosphere. Sammy ran around the hall, thrilled with his new baby brother and the new life they were building. "This is the start of everything I've ever dreamed of," Maya said as she watched the scene beside Tariq. "And it's only the beginning," he replied, holding her hand. By the end of the night, under a starry sky, Tariq and Maya danced together, surrounded by family and friends, celebrating a love that had overcome every barrier. It was the perfect ending to a journey that began unexpectedly, but blossomed into a story of true love. While Sammy played with the baby, Tariq and Maya exchanged glances that promised to face the future together, no matter the challenges. They knew they had everything they needed: love, unity, and a family that would continue to grow. And so, under the shining desert stars, their story reached its perfect conclusion, a new beginning filled with hope, love, and happiness. What do you think? Did Maya make the right decision by forgiving and marrying Tariq? Share your thoughts in the comments. I would rate this story an 8.5/10. It's a heartfelt and emotional tale that blends romance, family, and personal growth. The characters are well developed, and the story does a great job of showing how love and trust can overcome even the most challenging circumstances. The pacing is steady, and the emotional moments are impactful, making it easy to connect with the characters and their journey. However, the story could benefit from a bit more complexity in the plot or additional layers to the characters to make it even more engaging. Some readers might find certain aspects of the relationship dynamics a bit predictable, but overall, it's a touching and satisfying narrative. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with all our stories. And make sure to check out more heartwarming stories by clicking here on the end screen.